Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to 75 South Gardening. In this video, I'll be showing you step by step how I made this beautiful raised bed out of privacy fence pickets. So what you're looking at right now is everything that I'll be using to complete my raised bed. Now I'm going to go over each item because some of them are optional. So the first thing you're going to need is your actual fence picket. Now you want to make sure that you inspect these when you pick them up, because they could be bent like the one you see here. And if it's bent, it's more prone to splitting. Now the other end of that is this one. And as you can see, it has split. That's why I have my wood glue. The next thing you're going to need is a piece of wood in each corner to hold your fence pickets together. Now today I'll be using a 4x4 along with two 2x2s in the center, and that will support the trim that I'll be adding around the top of this raised bed. Now that's optional. You don't have to use the 4x4 or the 2x2s, and you don't have to add a piece of trim around the top. You could simply use a 2x4 in each corner, and you can use a 2x4 in the center to make it stronger. The next thing you're going to need is wood screws. Now the screws I have here are just extras from previous projects, and on the left, those are pocket hole screws that are made for wood. They're also coarse thread. You want to make sure that the screws that you have are coarse thread and not fine thread. Fine thread screws are only going to bottom out and spin around. Now if you don't want to use screws, you can always use a simple nail gun. For those of you that are going to be using wood screws, you're also going to need a drill. Now when using a drill, you want to make sure that you're actually using the right head for your screws. Now these actual screws are a Phillips number 2, so you want to make sure you're using the right head for your screw, or you could risk stripping out the head of the screw. Now you're also going to need a small drill bit to pre-drill your holes. That way when you screw in your wood screws, you don't split the wood. Thin wood like this splits very easy. Now some of my screws are short. You want to make sure that your screws are at least 2 inches long, or they simply won't penetrate deep enough. Now on the other side, I've already used my dowel drill bit. That way the screw goes down deeper and it penetrates as deep as I want it, versus you just drilling a hole and it doesn't go as deep. I want the strongest hole possible, so I'll be using my dowel drill bit, and this allows it to go down deeper into the wood. And if I wanted to hide the screws, I can do that also. Now earlier in the video, I said I'll go over each item because some of them are optional. This whole side is optional. You don't have to sand down your pickets. You don't have to add wood glue. You also don't have to add plastic in the inside or stainer. Now I'll be using the wood stain because it also has a sealer that will protect it from the weather, along with the wood glue right in here as I screw down my pickets. Now the plastic will be used to line the inside so that it doesn't rot as fast over time. I want this to last a few years before it decides that it wants to rot. And I'll also be sanding it down so that the wood stain can penetrate the wood properly. Now that you know every tool that you need to complete this build, you can go ahead and pre-drill your holes. That is step 1. But since I'll be staining this, I'm going to go outside and give it a light sanding, stain it, and let it dry in the sun. Now there's one tool that I forgot to mention, and it's simply a stapler. I'll be using this stapler to staple down the plastic at the end of the build. Now that I have all of my holes pre-drilled, I can go ahead and sand down each panel. And what I'm using is 40 grit sandpaper. Now it will leave scratches in the finish, but I'm not worried about scratches. I just want to remove the rough part of the wood so that my stain can penetrate. And you can tell the difference. This one hasn't been sanded and this one has been sanded. You don't have to make it perfectly smooth. You just want to remove the roughness of the cut. Now when sanding the wood, you want to let the paper do its job. You don't have to press down hard to get a smooth finish. And I'll give you an example. Now, if you press it down too hard, what's going to happen is you're going to clog up your sandpaper here. Then you're going to need another piece. I can use this same piece of sandpaper for this whole project. Now that I have all of my pieces sanded and my first coat of sealer applied, all I have to do is wait for this to dry. Now, I applied this with a piece of density foam, but you can also use a paintbrush. So once this dries for about 3 hours, I'll flip it over and do the outside. Now I also have an elevated raised version of this bed, and I'll give you a quick peep at that. Now this is one that I built a few years ago. It has a trellis at the top, and at the bottom it sits off the ground 2 inches. So it's been 24 hours since I've stained my wood. It is now fully cured and ready to assemble. So what I'll be doing first is assembling the side pieces. Now that I have my glue added, I can go ahead and screw down my fence picket. But once you try to press down on this, it's only going to slide. So to prevent it from sliding, what you want to do is get a little salt and sprinkle just a little salt on it. And that's going to keep it from sliding. So what I'm going to do now is use my adjustable clamp here. Now this is optional, but I'm going to use it because some of these have a slight curve. And by using this, I can pull one side down at a time to prevent splitting the wood. And you can get these at your local hardware store pretty cheap. Now once I get it on there where I want it, I can check it with my speed square again to make sure that it's even. That way, when I put it together, I don't have any gaps. And we are ready to screw down. Now that I have it in place, I can go ahead and lock down my screws. So I'm going to repeat the same step for the top piece, and then I'll show you how I like to put the sides together. Now that I have the sides done, I can go ahead and stand it straight up, just like this. Now all I have to do is add my glue, along with a little salt. Now I can add my fence picket like so, clamp it down, and screw it down. So I'm going to repeat the same process for the front that I did for the side. And if you take a closer look here, it doesn't have a huge gap because it's perfectly squared off with the 4x4. That's why I said use the speed square. And if you don't have a speed square, you could simply use the 2x4 and put it on the side like that. So I'm going to go ahead and screw these in, flip it over, and do the other side. And if the glue leaks out, what you want to do, just wipe it up like that and put it on the 2x4 or 4x4. And here's the finished product. Now all I have to do is add the centerpiece. These fence pickets aren't all the way flat. They're going to stick out a little. So to make it even like that, I'll add this in the center. And when I screw it in, it will pull it even like that. It would also allow me to screw down the trim that I'll take across here in the center for a stronger hold. This is now ready to go into the garden and be put to use. But before that, I'm going to go ahead and line the inside with plastic all the way around. And what that's going to do is keep the wood from being moist at all times. That way it won't rot as fast over the years and it lasts a little longer. Now that I have my raised bed put together, I can go ahead and line the inside with plastic. So the first thing I'm going to do is unroll this and cut it to the same exact length of the raised bed. So what I'm going to do, just pull it a little, flip it over, just like that, all the way around. Now all I have to do is go on this side, cut it, and then I'll staple it down into the inside of my raised bed. Now this plastic isn't very long, so what I'll be doing is making 2 cuts. Now that I have my plastic cut, I can go ahead and lay this in the inside of the raised bed. So we're going to go ahead and fold it up. That way, once I lay it in there, all I have to do is unfold it as I staple it. I also have a few extra pieces of lumber to hold it in place while I staple. I'm going to go ahead and lay it in the inside like this and unfold it. I can put that there like that. Put that one like that. Now I can start to staple it down. Now there's no set amount of staples that you have to put into the plastic. I'm just putting enough in here so that it holds in place, because once this is full of soil, the plastic isn't going to move anyway. Alright, so this is the final step. And what I'm doing right now is screwing down my trim to the top of my raised bed. Now I made this trim out of a piece of fence picket, and all I did was cut it down to the size that I needed using a saw guide. Now for those of you that don't know what a saw guide is, this is a saw guide. Right here is where you would clamp down your circular saw, and this one cuts up to 24 inches. For those of you that will be using a saw guide to cut your picket, you're also going to need something to clamp the picket down to that will hold it in place while you cut it. And what I'm using here is the edge of an old doghouse, and it worked just fine. So use what you have and make it happen. So far I have 2 down, 1 to go, and once I finish the inside of this one, it will be ready to use in the garden. And here's the finished product. I have all 3 beds done. I have my tomatoes transplanted finally, and I also have my trellis up. Let me know what you guys think about this build.